All right, welcome back, y'all. In the previous lesson, we built our very own Aroon Up and Down indicator. And at the end of that lesson, we sort of examined how well that indicator did in actually predicting good trades for us. And we found that it wasn't actually very reliable, which is no surprise. Most trading systems, most profitable trading systems, are made up of multiple indicators and multiple calculations. So for today's lesson, we're going to take that Aroon Up and Down indicator and we're going to expand on it by bringing in data from another indicator, namely a moving average crossover. So in order to do that, we are going to first create a moving average crossover indicator. And in doing that, we'll examine what the enumeration variable type in MQL4 is. And then once we have our indicator written down, we're going to use the iCustom function of MQL4 to bring the data from that moving average crossover indicator into our new Aroon Up and Down indicator. And that should look something like this at the bottom here. So whenever the Aroon up line is above the Aroon down line and my short moving average is above my long moving average, I get this green area that indicates that I should be going long. We'll examine this again at the end of the video just to see how well it does, but spoiler, it's probably not going to do very well, and at least I'm not planning on it. I think this goes without saying, but I'll go ahead and say it anyways. The purpose of this video series is for us to take our ideas, put them into code, and in the next few videos we'll see how to actually automate these ideas. Perhaps in a future video series, we'll talk more about, now that we know how to write our indicators and write our expert advisors, what are some strategies to actually, write good ones and get profit from that. That's just simply not the subject of this specific series. Let's crawl before we drive here. Okay, well, with all that said, let's go ahead and dive into it. All right, so I am in my meta editor, and the first thing I want us to do is create that moving average crossover indicator. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in my Taproot tutorials folder that we made in the previous video. So I'll have that selected and just click on New here. We do want a custom indicator. Now, since I had that folder selected, when I hit New, that subfolder is already in the name box here. So I'll just call this the MA crossover. And for parameters, we're actually going to need 3 for this. That's just the way I want to do it. We're going to take one is going to be our short moving average length. The second will be our long moving average length. And those will both be of type integer. The third one, however, I want to give the user the option to change what type of moving average this is. Is this a weighted moving average, exponential, simple? And that will actually be of type enumeration. And that is not something that we can do in the setup wizard. So we actually have to add that in the code. And we saw how to do that in the previous video. So let's just add our 2 inputs here, our short length. And let's give that like a 50, that'll be fine. And then we'll add our long length. And let's just say 200, let's be an arbitrary here. Okay, we'll hit next. Nothing we have to do on this screen as usual, we'll hit next. Now this indicator will be on the chart, not in a separate window, so let's leave this unchecked. And then we will have 2 plots, the short moving average and the long moving average. So we can add those here. So I'll call this the short MA. And I'm going to go with orange for my short line. And then the long MA. And for this, I'll do blue. I'll do a lighter blue, though. I've noticed the dark blue doesn't really show up too well on the videos. So let's go with aqua here. That'll be a fun one. Okay, so we're all set. That's everything we need. Let's click Finish. All right. So the first thing I want to do is add that next input parameter. So I'll come down to my input parameters section, keyword input, and now we have to give this a type. And the type of this variable is going to be an enumeration. So what is an enumeration? Well, an enumeration is a data type in MQL4, and in fact many other programming languages as well. Just like an integer is a data type that's defined by whole numbers, a Boolean is a data type defined by either a true or false condition. The string is just an array of characters. So what type of data defines an enumeration? Well, the short answer is a set of predefined constants. But what does that actually mean? Here, let's hop over to MQL4's documentation and take a look at this example here. So here we have an enumeration called months, and it's defined by the constants January, February, March, etc. Let's say we have a function in our code, and its job is to calculate some value based on a month of the year. And in fact, one of the input parameters to this function is a month of the year. Now, you could say that the data type of that input might be a string, right? Just like write out January. However, that can cause some problems in our code. Let's say for whatever reason, this function needs the first letter of that input to be capitalized, like January with an uppercase J as opposed to a lowercase j. And if that input is not capitalized, then this function will cause our program to crash, or it will return some unexpected value. Well, if our function is expecting a string and we give it a string, whether or not that string is correct doesn't really matter. Our program might still compile without any errors and instead be subject to a runtime error. Now, this is bad. We do not like runtime errors. We would much rather see an error when we compile than see our program crash or demonstrate some unexpected behavior when it runs. Like, if Frankenstein knew that his monster was going to go terrorize the townsfolk, he probably would have rather it just knock it off the table in the first place. At least one would hope. That's technically up for interpretation. Anyways, an enumeration can help us solve this problem. Let's say we have our function, instead of accepting a string as that data type for the input parameter, it accepts an enumeration, specifically this month's enumeration. If that were the case, then our program would only compile if the value of that input parameter was already defined in our enumeration data type, which means our function is much more likely to receive a value that it's expecting and not fall prey to a programmer's typo. In other words, if we tried to give our function January with a lowercase j, our program wouldn't even compile, because January with a lowercase j is not defined in our enumeration. It's looking for January with an uppercase j. This is just like our program wouldn't compile if we had some Boolean variable and we tried to assign it anything other than a true or false condition. So enumerations can also help with the readability of our code. Another potential solution to the above problem would be, instead of having our function accept a string as that parameter, perhaps it could accept an integer. And we could just map that integer to the months of the year, like 0 for January, 1 for February, etc. However, the problem here is that seeing a 0 or a 1 in your code is a lot more confusing than seeing January or February, if in fact that's what those integers are meant to represent. So, in summation, enumerations both help protect our code from bugs and also increase the readability of our code. And you, as the programmer, can create as many enumerations as you want, call them whatever you want, and define them with whatever constants you want. MQL4 already comes with a lot of these, ones we've already used, like moving average methods and applied prices. In fact, we'll be using both of those in just the next couple minutes. Okay, so let's come back to our code here. And the specific enumeration that we want to make this input parameter is going to be a moving average method. So we can type in enum, ma method, Okay, now we have to give this variable a name. So I'll say I am a method. And then the value of this variable, again, must be in the enumeration MA method. So I'm going to say, let's just do an estimated moving average for this. So it'll be mode EMA. And again, if I were to, for example, if this were just a string and I said, mode EMA like this, if I were to run my program with this code right here, I would get an error at runtime. But because this is an enumeration that's predefined with constants, if I try to compile this code right now, I get the error at compilation, right? Mode EMA, a constant is expected. So again, this will save my program from crashing or giving me unexpected behavior because functions in MQL4 are expecting a very specific format for what type of moving average this is. Okay, so here, I'm going to take a minute and just clean some of this up. All right. Okay. So that is all we have to do up here. Let's come down to our onCalculate function now and actually give a value to these buffers to draw these lines on the chart. So I'll come down to my onCalculate, and let's create that for loop that we've been doing, right? The for loop that's responsible for drawing this indicator retrospectively on all of the bars already on the chart, and then keeping our indicator up to date with new data coming in. So I'll create my integer, and we have called this integer uncalculated bars in the previous videos. I'm just going to call this limit today. And this is something that I've seen and you will perhaps seen in other indicators in MQL4, and it's obviously just easier to type than uncalculated bars. But it's the same thing here. So that's going to be rates total minus prev calculated. And then my for loop will be I equals 0, I is less than limit. And inside is where I will give my buffer variables their values. So let's do the short MA first. So my short MA buffer of I is going to equal, we're going to use the IMA function again. If you recall this from the first video, all this does is calculate a moving average for us. So IMA. Now, in the first video, in order to get the current symbol on the chart, we used a value of null here. But there's other values you can use too. You can use a predefined function in MQL4, just symbol like this. Or you can use a predefined variable in MQL4, which is just underscore symbol. Null, symbol the variable, and symbol the function, they will all give us the same result, which is just whatever symbol is already on the chart. And the same thing goes with the time frame, right? We can put null period function or this predefined period variable. So I'm going to go with the variables. That's just what I prefer. Okay, and the period here, the length of our moving average, that is an input variable. So we'll do the short length. Shift, we're not going to do anything here. Keep that normal. Now, our enum MA method. Again, this is the input variable that we've just created. So I'll put MA method here. We'll just do all of these for the close. Again, another enumeration here. And just keep this with I, nothing fancy. Okay, let's do the same thing for our long MA buffer. The only thing we have to change, other than the buffer itself, is going to be the length, right? Instead of the short length, we're now looking for the long length. Okay, let's compile again here. 0 errors, 0 warnings, and we can go ahead and add this to our chart. So there it is, MA crossover. And fantastic. There we go. We have a nice moving average crossover now. Okay. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead and copy our Aroon up and down indicator and then bring this data into that copy. So to copy an indicator in Meta Editor, it's actually not as straightforward as you would think. There is no just right click and duplicate or copy or paste or anything like that, which is unfortunate. So what we can do is we can just open this indicator and we can just save this as a new file. So that's what I'll do. I'll save this as Aroon Up and Down MA cross. Okay, and there we go. And I'll go ahead and change this comment at the top here just for clarity. So here's what we'll do here. The way that I want to bring that new data in to this indicator is I want to create another plot. I want to create a histogram that's going to fill in space for us, that shows us when A, our short moving average is above our long moving average, and B, our Aroon up line is above our Aroon down line. So let's create another plot for this indicator. Just like we did in the previous video, we'll copy this code here. I'm going to call this the go long histo for histogram, because this will indicate when we should be buying, theoretically. So that'll be the name of my plot. Now this isn't going to be a line anymore. This is going to be of type histogram. And for color, I think I used like light green in the example slide at the intro of this video, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to go with Papaya Whip, and we can finally see together what color this actually is. So hope you're as excited as I am. Style doesn't need to be solid. I'm going to go dot. I think that just is going to make it a little bit more visible so we can see our rune line behind it better. And width of 1 will be just fine. So once again, we have to change this from a 2 to a 3 now, since this is the third plot we have. We now have 3 plots in our indicator, and we'll need a third buffer as well. So we can go ahead and add that. Double go long histo buffer. Okay, and the last thing we need to do is actually map this buffer to an index. Copy that, and we'll use index 2 now. Okay, let's compile to make sure everything is all right. Fantastic. All right, so now let's go down to our onCalculate function and actually get a value for this new buffer. So to do that, I want to bring in the data from my moving average crossover. I want to get 2 pieces, right? I want to see what the short moving average value is, and then I also want to see what the long moving average value is. So I'm going to declare 2 variables to store those values later. The short MA and another double, which will be our long MA. Okay, so now that I have my variables to store my short moving average and my long moving average, let's actually give those a value in my for loop down here. So I'll start with my short MA. That is going to be equal to, this is where I'm going to use the iCustom function of MQL4 to reach into my moving average indicator and actually grab a value from that. So let's take a look at the documentation and see how that function works. So iCustom calculates the specified custom indicator and returns its value. So it's exactly what we want to do. And this is a lot like the IMA function that we just used. It takes a symbol, right? It takes a time frame, and we'll just default that to the current ones on the chart. But then what it takes differently is the name of your indicator that you want to reach into. And this is a string, and this is just the file path. Then we get to give that indicator custom inputs, right? So every indicator has its input parameters. We can set those in the iCustom to get the value of the indicator with those inputs whenever we call this. Then it's going to take in mode, which I think this is kind of confusing. But what this parameter is, we can see it right here, is which buffer do we actually want to get a value from, right? There is no like value of an indicator. That doesn't really make sense. But indicators have buffers that we do give values to. So I can specify in my iCustom function which of those buffers I actually want returned to me. And then in shift, just like any other, just like the IMA function, like which bar are we looking at? Okay, so let's fill this out. So say iCustom, and I'll just do my predefined variables here, symbol and periods. Okay, now the path, since these are in the same folder, I'm just going to go ahead and say MA crossover, and that will work. And that's the name of my indicator right here. Now, this is where I would put those input parameters. However, all of the input parameters in my moving average crossover, those have default values, and I'm just not going to mess with them for this one. So what I can do is, if I don't want to change the default values, I can just skip over all those parameters in this function call. I don't need to put an underscore or anything like that. I can just ignore them completely and jump right into the buffer. So that's what I'm going to do. So I want the buffer for my short moving average. If we recall, that's going to be at index 0 right here. So let's add that 0, and then shift is just going to be I. Again, nothing fancy. Okay, we'll add our semicolon. And let's copy this for the long MA variable as well. And the only thing we have to change here, other than the name, is going to be which buffer we're reaching into. We're not going to go for 0, we're now going to go for 1. Because in my moving average indicator, my long MA buffer is mapped to index 1. Okay. So now that we've got those values, let's go ahead and give a value to my go long histo buffer that I've just created. I, and that is going to equal, well, okay, so here's the thing. Technically, I really just want a Boolean value for this, right? I either want this to be on the chart or not on the chart. However, buffer arrays must be of type double, which kind of makes sense if we think about what they're for, right? The buffer is responsible for picking a point on our chart and drawing something there. And so that is a function of the price, right? And the price is a double. So we have to give a double value to these buffer variables. Now, I've actually done some messing around and tried, like, what happens if I give it true instead or false? And actually sort of works, but it has also caused my MetaTrader to crash. So play around with that if you like, but I definitely don't recommend it. So we're not going to mess with it today, and we're going to say, if I do want to draw my histogram on the chart, let me give this buffer a value of 100. If you recall, this indicator window for this Aroon Up and Down is between 0 and 100. So giving my buffer a value of 100 will draw a histogram line from the bottom all the way to the top. If I don't want this histogram on the chart, I'll just give this a value of 0. So in order to do that, I'm going to use a handy-dandy ternary statement, which if you guys have not used one of these before, and this is in a lot of different languages, these are like absolutely one of my favorite things. It's basically like an inline if-then statement. So let's see how that works. The first thing I need to do is give my condition here. So what am I checking to see if it's true or if it's false? I want to know if my short MA is greater than my long MA. And I also want to know if my Aroon up buffer at I is greater than my Aroon down buffer at I. Okay, so that's my if condition. And if this is true, I can give it one value. If it's false, I can give it another. So I'm going to separate my condition from my values with a question mark here. Now I can enter the value that I should assign to my go long histo buffer if this condition is true, which will be 100. And then I can separate my values with a or just a regular colon here. And now I can enter whatever value I want to assign my go long histo buffer if this condition turns out to be false. So that will be 0. So super neat way to just write a simple if-then statement, essentially, when assigning a variable. Saves us a few lines of code. It looks very clean. And you can totally chain these together as well to do like an if-then, else, whatever you want to do. Okay. Anyways, I love the ternary statement. All right, let's just go ahead and compile now. 0 error, 0 warning. Fantastic. And let's go ahead and add this to the chart. Let's see what we got. Okay, let's let this pull up here, and there we go. That nice creamy papaya color, right? Like a nice dessert. Okay, so let's see how this performs. So I'm going to hit Control F here on my administrator to get my little crosshairs. And let's see, we would have theoretically bought right here. So the Aroon up line was already above the Aroon down line. However, my short moving average has just now gotten above my long moving average. So I would have bought there and sold just in time, it looks like, just before this huge drop. Okay, so that's not too bad. Let's see, these are all pretty tiny. Let's see if I can go back in time and find something a little larger. Oh, there we go. Here's some spaces. Let's see. Oh, so I have this box selected that is going to keep my chart all the way to the front. Every time a tick comes in, it's going to make this demonstration real difficult. So let's uncheck that for now and take a look at some of these. So let's see. We would have bought right here and sold, I think, yeah, right here. So that wouldn't have been very good. Then we would have bought back here and sold right about here. Again, not very good. This one's not too bad, right? We would have bought right here, run my Aroon upline just crossed above the Aroon down, and we would have taken that all the way to here. So it's just all right. We did kind of miss out on, well, we're going to jump right back in the next couple bars and take that all the way up to here. So that's not too bad. I would say that this indicator is performing slightly better than the Aroon up and down just by itself. Again, I mentioned this at the beginning of the video, but do not trade with this indicator. If you turn a profit trading with the thing that we just wrote today, then you should probably stop trading and just go to Vegas. I don't think this is going to be very reliable. And we're actually going to see in the next video, and I might split that up into a couple videos, how to take this indicator that we've written today and code it into our own expert advisor, which we can actually back test and really see the hard numbers of just how well this indicator will do. I don't have great predictions for it, but we'll see what happens. So yeah, that is pretty much the lesson for today. So just to recap, today we built a moving average crossover indicator, and we learned what an enumeration data type was. We then took that indicator and brought it into another indicator using the iCustom function of MQL4. And we also learned a little bit about what a histogram was and ternary statements, all that good stuff. So that is it for the lesson today. Thanks again for watching this video, and I look forward to seeing y'all in the next one. Thanks as always for watching this video. If you found this content valuable, please let me know by liking or subscribing to my channel. If you have any questions or comments about the material we covered today, feel free to drop a comment down below. And of course, please check out some of my other videos for more useful information. All right, I'll leave y'all to it.